If we want to understand why this conflict exists today, we cannot simply begin the story in 1979. The history goes much further back, and I think that is essential to understanding Iran's relationship with the United States. The real turning point was 1953, when the United States and Britain helped overthrow Iran's national government led by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. They then helped restore the Shah, who ruled Iran for roughly the next 25 years, and built a highly repressive police state. During the Iranian Revolution, the United States continued supporting the Shah, even after the massacre known as Black Friday, when large numbers of protesters were killed in Tehran. President Jimmy Carter reaffirmed his support for him. After the revolution, Americans often remember only the embassy takeover and the 444-day hostage crisis. But without understanding the circumstances surrounding it, the event is impossible to put into proper context. The United States had given refuge to the Shah, despite his record of repression, and many Iranians feared that Washington was preparing another intervention similar to 1953. When the students entered the American embassy, they discovered documents that appeared to show American officials working with groups inside Iran to undermine the new government, including separatist and militant organizations. So from the Iranian perspective, the confrontation did not suddenly begin with the revolution. There was already a history of intervention, mistrust, and attempts to influence Iran's political system, and that pattern continued after 1979, including American support for Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War is another major part of this history that is often forgotten. The United States supported Saddam Hussein, even though his forces were responsible for enormous casualties in Iran. Chemical weapons were used against Iranians, and Western governments continued supporting Iraq despite what was happening. There is also a common misconception that Iran was simply receiving large-scale military support from Israel during the war. That is not an accurate description of what happened. During the Iran-Contra affair, the Reagan administration approached Iran and offered certain weapons, supposedly as a gesture of goodwill. Iran agreed to receive some air defense missiles, but some of those missiles even carried Hebrew markings. The Iranians rejected them, and the entire episode only increased mistrust. Eventually, the United States became directly involved in the war. American forces attacked Iranian oil facilities and Iranian ships, including commercial and naval vessels. Then, in 1988, the United States shot down an Iranian passenger aircraft over the Persian Gulf, killing all 290 people on board, including many children. What is important is that there was no meaningful apology afterward. In fact, senior American officials made it clear that they did not intend to apologize for the actions of the United States. This history matters because it shows why Iranian leaders and ordinary Iranians have such deep mistrust toward Washington. From their perspective, American pressure has not been limited to political disagreements. It has included coups, support for Iran's enemies, economic sanctions, military attacks, and attempts to weaken the Iranian state. So when people describe today's conflict as something that suddenly emerged in recent years, they are leaving out decades of confrontation. The hostility has a much longer history, and understanding that history is necessary if we want to understand why Iran responds to American pressure the way it does today. Today, the situation has become even more complicated because the Iranian demands for ending the conflict have expanded. Iran has made clear that any serious agreement cannot simply focus on one battlefield while ignoring what is happening across the region. The previous understanding was already undermined when the United States failed to fulfill its commitments. The Iranian position now is that Washington would have to return to the original framework and implement it fully. But there would also be stronger demands concerning Gaza, Yemen, and Lebanon, particularly the humanitarian blockade and the continued attacks against civilians. Gaza is especially important. Iran has been very clear that the suffering of civilians cannot simply be ignored while negotiations focus on other issues. Yemen and Lebanon are also part of the broader regional picture. I cannot say exactly what can be achieved regarding Syria or the West Bank, but Iran is particularly firm about Gaza and Yemen. There is also the question of American military capacity. Reports about shortages of missiles, energy supplies, fertilizer, helium, and LNG are extremely serious if they are accurate. But Iran would never plan its defense strategy on the assumption that American supplies are running low. We have to assume that the United States has everything it needs. Even without those shortages, however, another American attack would face enormous difficulties. The United States already used tremendous military power during the previous period of fighting and still failed to achieve its objectives. The danger now is that the conflict has expanded beyond Iran and Israel. Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and other parts of the region are becoming increasingly involved. If the war continues to expand, the consequences will not remain limited to the Middle East. We could see a much broader economic crisis affecting countries around the world. If the United States decides to attack Iran again, the consequences could be far more serious than the military planners in Washington expect. Iran has made it clear that if civilian infrastructure inside Iran is deliberately targeted, the response would not be limited to military targets. Countries that actively participate in such a war could find their own critical infrastructure at risk. That includes states such as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and potentially others. These countries depend heavily on energy infrastructure for electricity, water, transportation, and virtually every aspect of modern life. If those systems were severely damaged, the consequences could be immediate and enormous. That would not simply create problems for those countries. It could trigger a global economic catastrophe. Energy markets would be thrown into chaos, transportation would be disrupted, and economies around the world would suffer. The damage would not be confined to Iran. There is also an important development involving the Strait of Hormuz. Iran and Oman have been discussing arrangements concerning the movement of ships through the strait. The details have not been publicly finalized, but Iran's position is that it must have full knowledge of what is happening with vessels entering and leaving the area. The United States would not necessarily be part of such an arrangement. Iran and Oman could establish a system in which both sides have responsibilities and ships pay appropriate fees for passage. If Washington eventually wants to return to negotiations, however, Iran's demands will likely be much stronger than before. Tehran would expect commitments regarding Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, and other outstanding issues to be addressed from the beginning. The fundamental problem is trust. Previous commitments were made and then abandoned, so Iran is not going to accept promises without concrete actions. Any future agreement would have to be based on implementation, not simply words. Another important issue is the quality of decision-making in Washington. From the way the recent wars have been planned and conducted, it appears that American strategic thinking has seriously deteriorated. Some of the military plans have simply not been realistic from a professional military perspective. There is also a major difference in how much each side understands the other. In Iran, there are many people who closely follow American politics, elections, political parties, foreign policy, and debates in Washington. There are students, academics, and analysts who pay attention to these issues every day. The same cannot be said about American understanding of Iran. Many people who are presented as Iran experts have never been to Iran and do not speak Persian. Some have spent their careers saying what is acceptable to the political establishment because that is how they maintain access, funding, and influence. This creates a serious problem. When genuine experts challenge the dominant narrative, they can be marginalized. That happened to people such as Flint and Hillary Leverett, whose work on Iran caused them to lose their standing within the American political establishment. The military situation also demonstrates the problem. If the United States is using many expensive defensive missiles to intercept each Iranian missile, then even missiles that fail to reach their targets can impose enormous costs. The economic and military imbalance in expenditure matters, but the greatest concern is what happens next. Whether the war continues immediately or another attack is launched later, the consequences will extend far beyond the battlefield. A prolonged confrontation could produce a global economic crisis, affecting millions of people who have no influence over the decisions being made. That is why this should not be viewed simply as another regional conflict. The decisions being made today could affect the global economy, energy supplies, international stability, and ordinary people across the world. The longer this confrontation continues, the greater the danger becomes.